This meeting is being recorded.
So we have a
was
transcript for this already, right? So when is the transcript available? Is that something that's like quickly available?
okay.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to talk about some more Zoom and Min stuff, but it's not really important now.
What is going on? It's like we have two different recordings happening at the same time.
I always
No.
record, but evidently somebody else also started recording.
Okay, 'cause the screen is not matching the audio.
There was two simultaneous
It is for
from
me.
maybe two different people.
Oh, then I need to leave and then I'll see. So, bye
Yeah, and
everyone.
right there, you see,
Bye-bye.
and if we're going to use we're going to have to be very careful with because if you look at the last sentence, it was from two people and it looked like one sentence that was deranged. Right? It was somebody started a sentence and T's finished it with, and I have to leave. Right? So anyway, it's interesting to consider that if we really want to do a thing and capture the audio in a way that it's above 90% quality, maybe, hopefully.
So may I ask a personal question?
Yes.
When I made my initial statement, did that sound like I was powering over Doug?
No.
No, I'm curious to see the room's reaction.
No,
No.
I think Doug was just doing his thing. I think Doug is innately animated when he gets talking about these things.
You come across very faint for me. Sorry, Colin. I couldn't quite hear that.
I think Doug is animated innately when he talks about these things. He just is. He feels it deeply. That's all. And I think to assure him that we understand what he's talking about, we're not violating his values, I think goes a long way for him dropping his guard, perhaps. Because he's been fooled before. I think it's like, you fooled me before, nobody's going to fool me again with this alternate ideas.
It's harder for me to come up with a reliable mental model of Doug's frame of mind than for Sam's. I get Sam's frame of mind pretty well because he's pretty close to my own because we have similar educational backgrounds. I have a harder time framing Doug's frame of mind and having any confidence that I've captured it.
I came across an interesting thing. I know Sam likes Sapolsky, Robert Sapolsky, and I've moved on to Deleuze and Guattari. How do you say that? Guattari? They have a book called An Anti-Opetus on Schizoanalysis versus Capitalism. You guys aware of this kind of a thing?
I know Sapolsky's session on it.
Okay, he has one on this particular thing, and it's basically the idea that if we live in a silo of ideas, we never break out. And it's sort of when Doug is saying you can't fix it system with the same things that made the system, or
Right.
something like that. And this idea is more of a cross-cutting idea of a multimodal Heiner promoted view, and it's schizoid in the fact that it's all over the place, but it's not necessarily random in the way that one would think that a negative implication of a person being schizoid is, as opposed to the possibilities of sharing by mixing it up, I suppose, and being aware of greater possibilities. And that's kind of what I'm saying about the frames. There's multiple frames at possibility. The map is not the territory, and there's several maps, right? Basically. And I kind of came across also the idea of this virtual, which I mentioned, which is I know is Glenn still here? Yeah. No, Glenn's gone. Okay, I'll save this philosophy for Glenn, but it's more about the idea of what the realm of possibilities, and I think Deleuze had he had this his thesis was on difference, of how there's patterns and things and the difference. So I won't bore you with this, but it has to do with this difference comes out of possibilities, and that possibility itself comes from something he calls the virtual, which is like I guess where scientists go when they wonder and religious people go when they wonder into this world of virtual before the potential. I guess did I say possible? I think it's potential. So it's before potential. Anyway, and it's a realm that Glenn goes into a lot when I talk to him. He goes into what's possible, So that's what I feel like, Barry, when I'm talking to Doug. I feel like he's in the world of potential and feeling that somebody's trying to make it too concrete and lose possibilities. And I think I hear that from other people who say science aren't studying the right things. They're closing down their scope of potential. And anyway, the interesting thing that's larger than this potential is this virtual, which is an interesting word for Glenn. Not virtual reality, but virtual potential. Go ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, I just want to comment on what you just said about how you think he feels, because I have a similar feeling that I could just use an example for. So what I saw that everybody agreed on is that Glenn did a really good job of putting into context the different issues involved. And that collectively, I heard an agreement to continue on this quest with Glenn, since he was the original gatherer, taking lead on this item. So when you, Colin, use the word leader and say Glenn's the leader, that brings in all the baggage that Doug is talking about. And it doesn't need to be there because we were already all in agreement.
Well, I think it's self-promoted duty.
Whatever it is, I'm just
In the
trying to
sense
make.
that
calling.
ask Sam what he's doing, because I think Sam expressed it really well when he said that he's been meeting and they've come to the conclusion to redefine the word leader to mean lead from any seat, not lead from behind or lead from the, not baked in. Leading is about understanding from many different places, from any seat. Like, what's your problem today? Because you're at that seat when you're talking to that person.
Glenn was exercising his calling. His calling
And
was
that's
to
context.
gather a session
Yes.
to find out if, where is the overlap, where is the commonality that we can define a community around, a persistent community around.
Doug hit it, that we're all feeding into this idea of better. And I think we all have different skills and patience as well. I think patience is a big part of this. Being understood, I think, is the pinnacle of success. Because if you're understood, at least you could be wrong, rightfully so. Right? But if you're misunderstood, you never know if you're wrong, rightfully so, or right and wrong. You can't logically assess something if you can't express what it is you're trying to say and have other people interpret it. The will to interpret, I think, was the problem when I tried to organize something like this. It was too early, and I was bringing it out of my own domain. It was a quest, but not the same way that the quest that I was on is nowhere near the same quest that Doug mentioned with Glenn, because Glenn was bestowed from Doug basically an offer of, or at least a thanks for trying. I don't know if it's a future offer, but I was looking for that and was denied. So I guess everything you say beyond that point is outside the agreement. So as Sam says, you can save a lot of time if you know where the agreements are. So just spending on your time to see that catalyst forms, I think and you understand what the catalyst means. And if you want to call it contracts, responsibilities, duties, leadership, the idea is to keep it alive. So maybe we should call it keep it alivers instead of leaders. I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to point that I think Glenn was bestowed that, however you put it, because both Sam and Doug felt this trust in that he understood their position. So that's important too, because it was put in a clear way that neither of the main participants felt misunderstood in any way. Like they both felt like, yes, he gets me.
There's several reasons. I assume there was more turbulent times as well. I didn't write a 70-page dissertation on what it was I was going to do. I related on their trust and their willingness to play the game of discernment. And I think you've tried that too, Stacy, to just, think that if they had the trust, let's just try this out. But the lesson here is if you spend the time, like Barry says, and write it out, people will take you more seriously.
And again, to go and write it out really means that you have a passion for that particular thing, or you wouldn't take the time to do it, as it should be.
Exactly.
Well, I have to shower. Oh, I'm sorry.
it's just
finish.
a
Anyway, that was a
watering
really
hole.
good one.
If it's just a watering hole, people come and, have a cup of coffee, maybe once in a while, find a simpatico soul to go off with. That's nothing wrong with that, but that's also not a persistent community in its own right.
I think we're
And
looking
so
for more, but we
Yeah.
want it to form naturally, I think, is the idea, not contrived.
Josh?
Organic.
I just want to say, why are we trying to define it? Just let
we're
it
trying not to
be,
lose it. I
meaning,
think. Yeah, try to keep it alive. That's all. That's why. Keep it
Well,
alive.
But the question is,
Sam-
what is it? Is it a community? Is it a persistent community with some kind of a charter? Or is it just people kind of coming together to have coffee and once in a while finding somebody to say, hey, let's meet elsewhere on another occasion?
It is a
It's
community.
both.
It's a community.
it's
That's one
both.
thing.
I'm answering that question because I'm not taking that as rhetorical. It's both, because Doug tried to define it about 4 years ago. He said he would write it up. He started to do that, and
That's
there
right.
was no ability for him to have either the passion to write that up because it didn't align with his values and the values foundation, or whatever happened, it just didn't happen.
Well, I think
So
Sam
there was a
there.
lot of.
Sam and Tammy were part of it, and then Doug says, "Well, I'll
Well,
go
let me
away and
finish,
and write
Colin.
the
I don't want to
beginning."
be interrupted if you don't mind. I was.
No, that's all right. But I think this is a good story. I would like you to write.
No, thank you, and I would love to hear from you too. I want to hear your input. I just want to finish my thought so I don't lose my thought, which is,
Right out.
instead of defining what it is, let it naturally evolve to what this is what it's both. If someone's writing a charter, Doug's writing a charter. Now we've got Glenn writing a charter. The community is defined and it's on Facebook, and then at some point Facebook will go out and it won't be on Facebook. It'll be on whatever the next service. It's just good. It's an evolving bunch of system thinkers. I heard someone the other day try to define it and everyone got pissed at him. His name's Joe Lightfoot. He said there's this group of system thinkers that are meeting all over the web, and it's called the liminal web, and it goes from Faye Batson, and they try to define it. You can't
Liminal
define
web.
something that's evolving. It's not evolved yet to be defined. It might be defined after we're dead.
But if it's also a collaboration community, then the next question is, well, I'm willing to collaborate on some things that, that I can contribute to and have an invested interest. What are we going to collaborate on? That makes it a persistent community because you have an
Sure.
objective.
Well, I've been saving every one of your word of the day. I have a note file and it says Barry Court word of the day. I've got, I think, 22 now. You've been going quite hard, and I can put on, if we ever, I still have the GCC website up. I told everyone I was canceling it 3 years ago. I paid for it. It's still up there. If we ever redo it,
Yeah.
maybe someone will come in at some day and go, hey, you guys should make a website. Because that happens
I
every
wanna
so
interrupt-
often.
Let me interrupt you because I forget what I was going to say.
Go ahead,
before,
Colin.
but
I'm done. Go ahead.
There's a bunch of links that don't exist anymore from Sam, and it's a good point. If this is version 2 GCC, maybe we could come to some wisdom on what would be worth to keep alive and cherish. And we've got basically the Dictopedia, workflowy maps with the maps of GCC has disappeared. Josh's website has not disappeared, although he announced it would. And I don't know if we've actually, I think Glenn also spearheaded trying to do visioning, co-visioning, I remember, was a big thing. And leadership was a big word, where we were trying to have each person lead a particular GCC session and see if they could keep focus. So I think focus was a bigger word than leadership. Leadership, I think hosting or leadership, you could exchange those two. It was more about focusing. And we asked questions of whether we focused. I think that was a good practice. And I've always looked at knowing ahead of time, being ready, what it is you're planning on doing. And that's kind of what we did today, which was really powerful. So, and if we do manage to do some stuff, like there's always been a conflict with people like Alex Reed saying, why aren't we doing something? And then I think that was some of the first discussions we had about this, right? of whether we were a group or we weren't a group, the we and the I. The we and the I was a big discussion, eh, Josh? So, and we heard it again today. Doug was saying again, I don't see it as a we. And Sam says that I see it as a we, but a town square we. So there you go. What's the we in the GCC? Well, Sam is a town square. Doug is non-existent. Right? So I guess, I don't know. Doug re-announced a new GCC Sunday. I never really felt that take hold. I don't know what that was about, but it felt like he was putting a line in the sand. And again, back when he tried to write the governance, I think Tammy, Sam, and Doug were involved in that. So I say this to you, Barry, because I think everybody else knows about this, but it just kind of fizzled into the point that the emergence can't be characterized in a rule set way, as a community of excellence way. So I think Sam wins with the town square idea, and the sky's the limit to whoever you are and what you want to do. Like, I still got great things I plan on doing with some of the media. That's why I'm interested in knowing like what happened to these links. If I could spearhead something, it would be more like making sure that, say, by the summertime, we had some kind of a portfolio to put forward and what the GCC has done, the best of, where we failed and corrected, where we failed, didn't correct, and where, what we're most proud of, and Sam, I think we should also highlight it in the lens of collaborology, which is the Collaborology Institute. So, Josh talks about, a foundation. So, I don't know how to do these things, but I think you guys have seen examples of these things in operation. So anyway, that's what my expectations are. I'll just put that there. If something was to happen, anyway, I don't want to go on too long, but you guys are the experts. I'm just a coder, right? Josh has had a father who's been involved in a lot of this type of stuff. So he's, that's grassroots knowledge right there. So, yep. I'll put it on to Sam or whoever. I expect to be interrupted there, but nobody's interrupting me.
No, we learned not to interrupt. We that's one thing we learned. And Sam raised his hand. He didn't interrupt.
Yeah. Yes, he has his
Somebody I just heard, whether it was you or somebody else, Stacy, asked, or maybe it was Barry, what it is that we're hoping to see coming out of here, some action. I would answer it the following way. I would like to see each of us write down, and the writing is important, what it means to live a good life. What does good mean to myself? How do I affect good in the world? That to me, I think, is a great starting point. If we would each do that, we'd have great fodder for future conversations. That would be my first response to that. How am I living a good life? What does a good life look like to me? Over.
I'd like to reduce suffering. That includes suffering through interminable meetings where nothing happens.
I think what you just said, Sam, is directly right out of your community of impact sheet. That it's exactly out of that. And I want to know if you found the two other people that you know, like, and trust that are holding you to your highest good. And I every so often I ask you that. I'll ask you again. Have you found those two other people?
What's interesting to me is I find people, but it's hard to get together as a group of three. So what I eventually end up doing is one-on-ones.
Mm-hmm.
So this notion of having a three-way is much harder to actually put into practice. But one-on-ones with doing this retrospection, yes, absolutely. In fact, the question I just asked earlier of did I exhibit, power over when I was talking, in my first share, that was one way of soliciting that response. And I'll probably go into one-on-ones with some of you, okay? And what's interesting is I have sometimes one, sometimes two, sometimes three people that I do these one-on-ones with. it's rare to get a three-way. So I'm wondering whether or not that part of it should be dropped. But that number is certainly more than 3 of people that I get into these perspectives with. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's my best attempt at it.
No, that does. That's perfect. That's
And
the
how do you
honest.
filter that? Yeah, and how do you
yep.
filter the number is a good question. Like, because that's part
Well-
of the conversation navigation, right? When you have people in the room and when you don't.
I think we've done that, Colin.
Does Colin come through clearly for everybody? Because I can barely hear Colin.
I get about 2 words out of every 3.
Okay.
Colin, I
A little
think
away
you're
from the
far
mic, Colin.
Yeah, let's pull it up closer. I've got it. It is 3.1 dB down, and I did have a problem with it earlier. I had to turn it down. Yeah, let's give
There you
it
go. That's
some.
better.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. Thanks for letting me know. So what are we talking about?
Talk about
Collaboration.
scaling and collaborating. I think there's a gentleman on Clubhouse that's very successful because he refuses to have these stages with 20, 30, some people have 100 people on stage, and he just does one-on-one. That is his thing. He has a deep conversation with one person at a time, and then when they leave, he invites another person up. So it's a dialogue. And there's a very huge power to dialoguing as opposed to trialoguing. And I think GCC found that we have a number that just works. If you just look at all the conversations, you can see it's 6 is usually the number. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 5, but it's on average 6 people. And 6 to 7 people is the average number that always come. And that's the
What's the
number that
average
seems
in
to
the-
work for us.
What average do you find in the chat rooms with the voice only, like Clubhouse and such?
The average of everything,
Yeah, well, like you're in Clubhouse too. Like, how many people are usually in those rooms?
on
A lot
average,
more?
it's about 300.
Yeah.
Because
But there
there's
is some
some
pretty
rooms
big
with
rooms.
thousands. Yeah, there's a lot of rooms. The most
still
of the rooms
haven't.
that I see are about 15 to 30.
Yeah, I still have 15 to 30 sounds realistic. That's
With
what I
with
see. Yeah.
with the same number that we have on stage, though. It's usually 7 to 8 is the max you can put on stage without people starting
Right.
getting into arguments.
Yeah.
When I was in a science room last night and it got really heated, it was about the the properties of water in a cell. And there was a guy giving his dissertation and showing his PowerPoint slide at the same time. He pinned it to the top and it got really heated. And the person that runs the room says, you know what, this isn't helpful for the people listening on replay later on, hearing you guys argue. And then they also talked it through and said, well, it's really important to argue because of science. We need those arguments in the science community in order to get to an understanding. So it was both, okay, can you do it nicer if you're going to argue in a way that we can hear the argument? And that was agreed upon, but we still need to argue. That's really important in order to actually get somewhere in a conversation. Because if everyone's doing the niceties, oh, okay, I understand that, thank you, and they don't really understand it, and they leave going, this guy's an idiot, I don't like what he said. Conversation dynamics and conversation technologies are very different with very different conversations. And we've noticed that with Sam's conversation on Saturday is different than Doug's on Sunday and all the other ones we've had on the Thursday and Friday. So the dynamics are dependent upon what subjects you're discussing and how the format of, if it goes around the room, if it's popcorn style, if
Right.
it's laying out a message at the beginning, which Sam tries to do and does very well on Saturdays. Hey, this is what I would like to talk about. But then he leaves it to the town square and says, does anyone else want to talk about something else? Because if you're not in, and I'm the only one in on this subject, it's going to be a rough 2 hours. So those dynamics, I think we've learned, at least for me, I'll just speak for myself. I learned a lot over these last years of all the different dynamics of all the different conversations. And I missed the one where we all sang, and I wish I was there. The one day that everyone decided to sing the whole conversation. But we've practiced quite a few different styles. We've practiced. Sam's had many people say, hey, if you want to take over Saturday and present your thing, go right ahead. We've had many different people present. I think you know, it just continues to evolve. And the reason I want to put it in a trust is because I would like it to go on past us. I'd like groups of people trying to, like you said, Sam, if you write down the thing that is good to you, and then you have a community that hears it, then there'll be some people in that community, whether it be a one-on-one or whatever it looks like, to hold you to that good that you want, or to discuss it further to try to elaborate and reduce down the things that are not good. And a lot of the conversations we've had here, I've heard hundreds of them in the clubhouse room, the exact same conversation we've had, from governance to community to saving the world, blah, 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 to science. I mean, it's just humans trying to figure out everything together with other humans that we know, like, and trust. And that's why I come here. I know you guys, I like you guys, and I trust you guys. No one here has turned out to be a complete asshole.
We are incomplete assholes.
Yeah, well, we're incomplete then. There you have it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm looking over an old proposed map I made, and it was showing the videos. And we used to discuss this, and I had all the different sets: new, original, and the retiring and the retired, the appreciators, Fridays, unblocking, the old unblocking, and open Thursday. They're all gone. And then we had some new ones proposed, Thursdays, but that didn't happen. The new unblocking is actually happening. And the notes I took, it was about less on the Wii. And also there's many videos and backlogs. I got to note that, you know, the videos didn't come
Colin,
from
would you be interested in meeting with this Joe Lightfoot, who's doing this, trying to put together this whole community all over the web, this intellectual dark web, or whatever you want to call it, this liminal web, the system thinkers, this group of people that are trying to actually do good in the world? If you would like,
that sounds interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you want to
sounds
meet
cool.
the guy, you can just go to YouTube. I can give you the keywords. I can text it to you afterwards. I don't have the ability to do that at the moment, but his name is Joe Lightfoot. And then
Joe
you
Lightfoot
type in
YouTube.
liminal web, Limenal, I believe, liminal web, Joe Lightfoot, and the video will pop up.
Seen this before. The Stoa. This is the Stoa.
Yeah, it's the Stoa. That's the one. So you can watch it
Oh,
later.
I've seen the Stoa. Yeah, I've seen those guys before. Yeah, they're a little out
Yeah,
there in the
that's what I'm saying.
woo-woo.
So the point is that we all kind of
I know
know
who
each
this guy
other.
is now. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
but we
I don't mind
all
people
know
like
each
this,
other.
but he's like Doug Plus. You know what I
That's the point that I'm making, is that we're all trying to figure this thing out.
No, I'm not going to put any blocks in the way. See, that's, I think you have to be careful. People don't think just because you're opinionated and skeptical, maybe just keep your opinion to yourself and leave your skepticism to bear. But, you know.
Well, he's there trying to map all this stuff out and figure out how all the communities intersect and who knows who and what's
That's
what,
powerful.
and put a name
That's
on it.
powerful. It's almost like the Latter-day Saints. They're the ones that did all the genealogy, right?
Oh, they recorded it,
Yeah.
researched.
Recorded a whole lot. Yeah, they did a whack of work, but that was all just, it was because they wanted to, they had their own means, but we benefited from it, sort of, I guess. They had their own reasons, I should say. I think it was to baptize people or something.
I don't think they
That
do
was-
baptism in the Mormon church.
What's the word? It's to bring them into their get
I
their
may be
name on
wrong
the
about
book.
that. Maybe they do baptism. I forget.
I think they do something. I know I seen this big pool with the cows around it in the big temple, but and I think it was a water bath. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they do have a baptism room. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, something weird there. But I think it's to get them in the book after their death, right? Get them on the
Maybe.
book of souls.
I don't know. I'm not a Mormon.
It's
or a
all just
Latter-day Saint.
well, the thing is technology came out of it. A lot of technology, genealogy, you know, and biology and things like that were big forces on the internet, especially in early days. Yep. But yeah, so
Everything's changing. Are you noticing, Colin, like, did you hear the news from DeepMind that they have now the ability for the GPT-3 or whatever they're calling it? It's not GPT-3 because that's OpenAI, but They now can go 54% coding. The computer can code as good as 54% of all the coders out there.
Saw
Did you hear
that.
about this
Yeah.
news?
That was a
Well, I
headline
think
yesterday.
yeah, I think that the technology is increasing even more, and hot reloading, writing dynamic code. Of course, we've been doing that with Perl ever since the early days, right? But it's to have it integrated into the orchestration of the systems is where
The tedious work, not the
well,
thinking
it's to make
coding.
it's no
but
longer the low
tedious.
level where the bugs are and passwords are unsafe. It's now ubiquitous through the, how would you say, the orchestration is what they call it now.
But that's a big, for me, that's a big deal because I stopped coding in 2014 and I haven't looked back. I just found places to buy the code. I used to get crates and crates of records and CDs and try to, sample and know where I'm sampling from. And now there's a website that I can just attribute. I can grab any part of any song, attribute that to the person if I put it out commercially. Like everything I've ever wanted is just here now. Like it's, I one of the guys at the 5 Times Nice, my music collective, he just got an iPad and everything opened up to him with that pen, the ability to draw on a pad. He never had an iPad before, and he's texting me like every hour on the hour, like, holy crap, I just created 4,000 NFTs. And it's like the power of the control of these little brushes. Like I have this little pen, and how hard I press it on the pad, the touch sensitivity keeps going up and up and up. And the amount of brushes that can be created, if you take one brush and you change the jitter and the movement, you can create really fancy geometry inside of a brush. So you can pretty much paint anything now on a tablet with really nice features. So it's, I mean, I can go on and on and on about how much from just 2 years ago when you were using OBS. Colin, have you seen the latest technology with the OBS?
Doing
rebroadcasting? The gateways to open broadcast out to Facebook, to Clubhouse, to Twitter Spaces, to Twitch, to Zoom,
what you
to here, to there. Like
publish
those protocols were not just 2 years ago. They were just sort of settling on a protocol that makes that work, and now they've been practicing it for 2 years, and it just works.
Yeah, kind of
like we can turn this into an Instagram live.
Twitchverse. They Twitch and go to their YouTube channel at the same time. Everybody's using OBS. There's a couple of different versions of OBS.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's my point, is that there's a lot more versions, and I'm saying the actual stream.
Yeah, I can push a button and
compression,
stream from here to Twitch and YouTube and all that. Yeah, it's just put
it's
in
amazing,
your key, right? Put in the key.
Well,
yeah, the API's there. Yeah, I know.
We didn't have
this
before.
We are broadcasters. You got it. Just got to have something good to
Yes.
say, Barry.
That's the key. Got to have something good to say. It's easy
Barry's
to fill
got
up. Easy to fill
Barry's
up
got
the airwaves
catalogs.
with junk. And
Well,
hard
that'd be a
to fill
good
up.
show. We could do that. We could do a segment with Barry. He's going through the archives here. Well, let's find something interesting in the archives. Oh, I know something that's interesting you people would probably enjoy.
Yeah, well, you're going to
With the
have 10
segment.
episodes of junk, and then you're going to have that one where everyone's like, yo, that was the best. Like I go into Clubhouse rooms, they all suck. Last night, the water inside of a cell was the first good one I've seen in about a month and a half.
Was that an electrolytic cell?
Electrolytic, you said?
Yeah, where you put electricity into a vessel of water and you run electric current through it.
I don't know.
I think they're talking
that's what I
biological
wanted
cells.
to talk about. This was biological cells.
Yeah.
Biological cells. Okay,
Yeah.
completely different subject.
Yeah, but it's still, I want to go into the electro. So there's Stephanie Seneff, and I just found another lady out of Caltech that's doing I want to know about the electrical system of the cell itself with giving a pH balance of 7.5.
You're talking about living cells.
Living cells, human cells.
That's a big difference from living cell to an electrolytic cell,
Correct.
test tube with water in it or something. Okay. Batteries, for example.
But you've seen this thing about a little frog. I don't know if it's cells, but they're creating like little Pac-Mans where they're regenerating themselves. And there's all sorts of new science of cellular regeneration that didn't exist.
Yeah, I saw a story where, I don't know if it was a frog or some animal regenerated a complete leg. I don't think it was a
Mhm.
frog, but they, first time, I think they completely regenerated a severed leg on some kind of a reptile.
Salamander, I believe it was.
Salamander, okay, yeah.
But the point being is that, you know, there's the headlines in the tech news was that they're actually going to be creating robots that are wet nurses for cellular regrowth of human beings in China. So it's like dystopian nightmare is actually happening in China, where they have to like make these new babies
talking
because they're
about,
losing their population.
Matrix boobies? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm
You're
saying
talking about,
the
you're
things
talking about
that were
boobies from the Matrix.
I'm saying these
IoT
things that were
boobies.
not possible, that were all
Yeah.
science fiction, are all slowly creeping into the real world.
Well, CRISPR
it's-
changed things a big with, you know, once I heard about the CRISPR story, I said, you know, that's a big word, slicing genes at home. You know,
Well, what about
paste.
synthetic viruses that escape from labs and change the whole world? Like
well,
that
okay,
would be
this
a
could be a
science fiction
popular video.
novel.
Let's not let's not
Yeah,
talk about
I'm
it
just
too.
saying that was a science fiction novel about 10 years ago
Yeah, I
called
know.
Bird Flu, and
That was real, actually,
it's-
by the way. It's called the avian flu.
and
Well,
it's
And
the
then
mutated.
they
mRNA
had,
The
and then they had
mRNA
Ebola.
vaccines are cut and paste with CRISPR,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
intentional cut and paste, not accidental or, you know, haphazard,
it's
but
quite
very
it's quite
engineered.
fascinating because when I was in school, I didn't conceive that to be a real possibility for anybody other than, you know, labs and big buildings ever, if ever. You know, but what we're going to be able to do by switching the tables on who's in control of the data, like banks used to be in control of the money, now we're in control of the money. Information, now we're going to be in control of the information. Our
And
healthcare and our
disinformation.
biology, we're going to be in charge of our healthcare biology. Go ahead there, Josh. I see you got a thumb up. Oh, thumb up. I thought it was hand.
Oh no, I didn't even put that up there. Someone
Yeah,
else
so I
put
guess
it up there for me.
what I'm saying is we
I
have
didn't put the
a progression in the ratchet of our agency to control our world, where other people
well,
used to
there's
be
also a new
there no
generation
more.
that came up.
No more gatekeepers.
But just in the time we've been at GCC, a new generation came up. Like they were all 14 years old and now they're 20,
Point. Yeah.
or they'll be 20 next year. So that's a new generation. And they're doing things like I talk to some of these young kids and I'm like, okay, just stop. You're too fucking smart. Like it's driving me crazy.
I would like to find a formula, a format, a protocol for the GCC show that really works for us and everybody. It'd be fun.
I think this is it.
Well, I think this is it, minus the highlights, which it would be what I'm thinking.
You can edit it any way you want, Colin. I don't think anyone's going to be pissed off here. If you edit it in a way that made someone look terrible, they'll let you know.
No. Well, here's for an example. You remember when he was talking about data butlers, right?
Mhm.
That's where we're all involved in the show, basically putting on the show, knowing what's happening, helping feed the information forward for a context, as opposed to just waiting for the coffee to get hot and get another coffee. Sometimes we do that too, right? That's the beauty. You can do all kinds of different things. There's no wrong way to get together. But if you did have like what Glenn did, and we supported that, that was always kind of my vision with Sam and Collaborology, that there was going to be potentially some events, maybe one or two a year, that we work towards. Although it's never really been stated, you know, and I think, you know, we've been tooling up for, you know, building this invisible tower. What was that one in the one where they explain this, where everybody, the project becomes itself the project, keeping up with all the maintenance to keep the project. What you're actually building is no longer the project. It becomes a project over the ages. What was that? That was the tower, the big tower they were building. I think Alex Gagnon painted a picture of it. The tower, not the tower.
Can't follow your logic, but
Well, there's a tower that, anyway, the point is that people, there's so much meta and so much investment in procedure that you lose the ability to actually work on the thing you intended to work on. it's like we never even defined the building that we're working on.
But
So
that's
it's all
exactly what
meta.
happened to the Facebook Corporation. They had to change their name to Meta because they don't even know what they're doing anymore.
There's a
Well, I
tower in
think-
one of the Canadian cities named after one of the railroad companies.
The CN Tower?
Yeah,
I think this is
Canadian
the-
National, yeah, CN Tower in, is it Montreal or Quebec? I don't
It's
What
know.
in
was the one in the
Toronto.
Bible?
Toronto.
What was the one in the Bible that they built to the heavens?
That's
the Tower of Babel.
Babel.
That's the one.
Oh.
I had a feeling you were babbling.
This is the Tower of Babel right here.
This is
Yeah.
it. This is the Tower of Babel. If we wound the conversation like a rope, it would have gone really high up in the sky.
So I guess I wasn't that far off once we get the right term.
Well, it's like the
It
word
is-
cell, cell can be a living cell or a battery cell. I mean, the word cell has many kinds.
Yeah, a prison
Well-
cell.
Prison cell, there you
Yeah.
go.
Well, the ability to come and meet at the coffee shop here, the town square, or whatever, is also not to be dismissed. As much as
I
I say,
agree.
I'm private. Yeah, it's nice to see people come back and talk and be and become. maybe.
Become.
And-
Yeah, there's the word become.
Yeah.
Become.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
I think I attributed
good.
that to Barry on this diagram somewheres. Not sure. Anyway.
It's an important word to become.
Yeah, I
and
just saw
I
a,
find it's always the editing that seems to be the problem. Even that Wikipedia stuff that you went through, Barry, that story. It was the editing schisms, right? It's editing schisms.
It
That's
was
what
a
it is.
disagreement on what constituted correct content of an encyclopedia article versus
Hmm.
just bogus opinion.
Barry, you'll like this one. I grabbed a picture from Facebook. There's a new feature in the iPhone where you can grab the text off a picture,
Mhm.
just copy and paste. So I copy and paste the text, pasted it to Facebook, posted it last night, woke up in the morning and it said, "This is fake news." Like Facebook edited my shit. I was like, what? It said, "This is not a quote from C.S. Lewis." I was like, well, it's a great quote. Just take off the C.S. Lewis. Like, but they edited it. That's the first time I've seen Facebook actually edit something. Like,
That's
Text.
bizarre.
it was so bizarre. I thought they were editing the photo because I stole the photo from
Mhm.
somewhere. I was like, okay, it's a non-copyright photo. I get that.
You probably
it
just
wasn't
won
the
the
photo.
audit lottery. You just won the audit lottery. That's all.
I think they were trying to up the defense against putting in text content that was verboten. So people would take a photograph of the text and put that up, and then Facebook couldn't read it to tell if it was verboten. So then they're learning to read the text on photographs and apply the same constraints. Or
Well, if they're
censorship.
constraining a C.S. Lewis text, can you imagine what they're going to say next? Like that platform, now I know why they lost $270 billion in like one day.
Exactly. They don't recognize art and science from baloney. They can't really decide if a piece of text, whether it's written or a photograph, is
And again,
va-
Where is
valid-
that-
valid
where does-
content.
sorry, to interrupt, where does that filter and that decision actually lie? Really?
Algorithms.
Like, well, no,
Algorithms.
not where it lies today, but in a Glenn Gaslin world, where would that lie? That would lie with
Oh.
us, right? Like
Well,
what
that's
we
the
feel.
whole censorship thing,
Yeah.
Not
Nobody
allowed to
knows
put
how
that
to-
here.
asking what- Yeah. How do we filter whatever? Like filtering is a big thing. High pass,
But
low
that's the
pass.
big conversation.
Spotify just took down more than 100 of Joe Rogan's podcasts, but nobody knows for sure what the criteria Spotify used.
Kicking
Yeah,
the nuts
and-
criteria.
That's been the conversation on the Joe Rogan podcast for 4 years now. He even had the head of legal at YouTube and he had the CEO of Twitter come on and have the conversation. How are we going to start editing moving forward? And what is this PC culture? It started with Brett Weinstein getting kicked out of Green State College or whatever it is up in Oregon.
Yeah. wasn't
And
Green State,
it's
yeah.
turned into, we don't know how to move forward with reality to create a mass collective consciousness that we can all agree upon, let alone doing it in a nation state. We've got to try to do it in a global society. And
Yeah.
that is just too tough.
Yeah, it is. And I see
With
stuff now on
accommodation.
Facebook in foreign languages and foreign alphabets. I haven't a clue what they're saying. They're just, you know, even though it's in text, I would have to copy and paste it into Google Translate to find out what they're talking about. And it's not worth it.
Yeah, and I follow a show called Breaking Points because they actually will do that for me. They'll go to the foreign text and they'll translate it and then say it in English to the news audience to hear what's going on over in other countries. And
that's
I
an
used to do
interesting
that.
segment.
Oh yeah, it's really fun. Like I dated a girl from Paris and I used to talk about the news in New York in
I've
2006.
seen a little bit from Al Jazeera. Like Al Jazeera does a little bit of that, right? They're
Well, it's
pretty
really
good.
interesting. She would be like, why don't you just read the news in French? It's totally fucking different.
BBC, even in English, BBC carries completely different stories than NPR. Overnight, my NPR station plays the BBC for 4 hours. Completely different set of news.
Yep.
And completely different coming out of Iran. The news coming out of Iran is completely different, and the news coming out of Ecuador is different.
Yeah.
I see a 3D game here, Josh. I see a 3D opportunity.
Well, that's the chess game that's being played, is everyone's trying to figure out what reality is through the lens of their cultural appropriation of their nation state ability to sense reality.
We'll call the game Throne. You know how they play those Call of Duty games or whatever, where they get dropped out of a helicopter and they have to land and start shooting.
Oh yeah.
Or there's another game called
we'll,
the World Peace Game. That's from
that's
Buckminster
right.
Fuller.
So maybe we'll take the World Peace Game and we'll start it with the guy just sort of falling and we'll call it Throne. You just throw them into another place on Earth and they have to deal with it. They wake up and whatever the culture is what they got to deal with. Call it Throne. That'd be fun.
I think we're going to figure it out with the primer between all of these lenses is going to be some sort of algorithm that we all create together. That's going to put in some sort of standard encyclopedia or standard whatever that I don't know if it'll be a majority of the people in the world that agree upon it, but at least the government, whoever's governing these states will agree upon it. And that's kind of what we did after World War II with the United Nations and with NATO.
Yeah.
So they'll continue to meet these heads of states and talk about what reality is for the rest of us. And then we'll all figure out if we agree on it or if we don't.
You would think that we'd already had some collection of good ideas that we could, like a deck of cards. Didn't you have the cards one time? What was the spice deck you called it? What was that deck of cards you said?
That's Dove Sol's The Meeting Spicer.
Yeah, something like that. And I know different people make them, but I think that should be more prevalent. I know I've heard other people who talk about the intelligence. They talk about.
You ready for this, Colin?
Cards. Yeah.
It comes down to a science called philosophy. And the best idea with the best logic wins philosophically, and that becomes the zeitgeist. It's a philosophical question, and we're all turning into philosophers and trying to understand reality. And that's why we're all arguing with each other, because everyone thinks their logic is better than someone else's logic.
That's why you got to do experiments to test your theories to see if they work in practice.
Right.
Social experiments.
Very often
the framework tools aren't there yet. Yeah, they don't have the tools for the frameworks yet for battling frameworks. The best we got are debates, right? Like that's what we've come up with.
Actually, you have to think better than debates, because what you can do is if you want to test something, you can create a community of participants who agree to engage according to a certain protocol and find out if that protocol works in practice.
That's right. Well, that's what my diagram is here.
Yeah, you can find out.
I'll put it back on again. I think that's what I've drawn here. Tell me what I've missed out of just this random wisdom.
Well, that's too small for me to read.
I don't know if I can screen share this or not.
Well, no, but the thing is that even if you screen share to full size, I think it'd be a little bit hard to process.
Do you have a full flow chart, Colin?
He has one's the size of a wall. And the one that's the size of a wall, if you're viewing it on a 24-inch screen, you have to memorize most of it, because you can only see, a little piece of it at a time. I tried that once. I couldn't process a mural
I
size
don't know if that's,
flow chart. It was too big.
So where does the logic start with the logic gate, the beginning of the first node?
okay, here's the, so can you see this thing on my screen?
Yeah,
No, it's
I
cut
can.
off on the left.
Well, I can see the two blue boxes
it's-
at the top, then,
Am I sharing my
moved it.
screen?
yeah,
Yeah. It says agreement of editing schisms, and it goes to two sides: add improvements, remove problems, align.
So it starts at the
allows.
bottom down here, moving forward.
It needs to be refined because I can't follow the logic.
yeah, I mean,
No,
what,
no,
to me.
just let me tell you what it means, because it is shorthand, right? So
Okay, go ahead.
essentially, yeah, so essentially, in order to move forward, Barry just said you need to have a protocol or a context. That's the first thing I check, because context matters more than you know, right? So don't lose your eye on context, the premise, whatever, the focus, blah, blah. And then you got leadership and agreements, which we talked about today, whatever that may be, because it's, you got a context, you got to manage that context. Management, trigger word, sorry, Sam. But manage complexity might be a better way to think of it. And I think that's where the listening and understanding comes in. In order to be a leader, you have to be able to listen and understand, be able to handle agreements. And then if you have this foundation, then you can go on to alignment, which will allow further refinement, which is the iteration, the agile method. You got protocols and processes in place, expectations, goals, whatever. And Sam's always talked about the request for comments as a way to edit in a very loose way. And that's the way the internet was kind of built too, right? It's request for comments. So this is a large, I think a large success that we haven't really needed to do anything. We're kind of meta. So the product is a meta diagram. And where I've seen the most difficulties of anything we've tried to do move forward is agreeing on editing. How do we bring a body of material forward? Newsletter, Trello, Josh's website, articles that we write, Glenn's document that we saw today. How are we going to move that forward? The video so I'm not bitching, but those are the opportunities that we can have for
I think
memory.
you have to define moving forward.
Well, I think that's right. That's why it's kind of left open. Moving forward, what context? Once you define the
It's too,
context,
it's
then,
too undefined to be a protocol.
well, this is where Doug says, this is wait here. Doug says start empty, right? So
Colin,
that's
there's tons of these already logic gates of protocols. There's hundreds of systems out there.
I'm sure there is, but I'm
Just
just
pick
doing
one that's already been created and just use that one.
well, that's what you would think. Pick Trello. Trello's already been written. I don't have to write the software, but it's
No. I mean a protocol for agreements of editing.
Oh, no. I'm saying just to pick the tool and to say we're gonna, work together.
It's not
Like
the tool that's the problem.
simple.
It's the protocol. No one's picked the protocol that we all agree upon. The agreement of the agreement. That's where we're stuck.
Right, we're stuck here. So you're right, we're stuck there, and we should have.
But I'm saying there's already protocols out there. Like when we did Occupy, we picked a protocol and we used it. That was Robert's Rules of Order.
That's right. So
and once we all were on the same protocol, we had meetings all over the world with Robert's Rules of Order. And that was an anarchist movement. That was not a movement of a community of any defined hierarchy. It was anarchy, but the anarchy was it was run through a protocol called Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah, so Robert's Rules of Order. So I think there could be a whole list of success stories and failures of different things that have been tried. But this is kind of what I see the foundation of the pillars of Sam's, as I feel what a message from Sam is right here.
What I'm trying to say is pick one that already exists. Pick one that exists, Colin, and then rewrite that. As opposed to starting from scratch.
I think that what you're talking about is right here. That's up here, whatever you pick. So that's kind of like the next level down in but you're right. Once you pick context, this should be able to be answered. Why is this so big?
Well, we've done context because Sam ran some meetings all perfectly timed with a protocol, and they were successful. And that was when Eric was keeping the time. Do you remember that conversation years ago? I don't know. It was quite a while back.
Yeah, no, we've done some successful experiments for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think
And we all voted on the subjects afterwards. Was that helpful, or we had different criteria, and then we moved forward to the next one? It was all the thing that kept it organized was time. That's what's
time
missing here
and-
in GCC.
well, it was about focus. Oh, what are you talking about? That wasn't GCC? That was GCC.
No, what I'm saying is when we talk, we don't have a rule. Like in all the Clubhouse conversations I have, they say, okay, you get to talk as long as you want, or you get to talk for 5 minutes, or you get to talk for 2 minutes, or
Right.
you get to talk for move to the next person. We don't have
Right.
that rule here at the GCC.
No, that's been proposed quite a long time ago as well with the different formats. But
And we
could
tried
choose,
it and it worked great.
yes, I think we have, but we've never really said, like, for example, today, and I think naturally when people don't interrupt each other unnecessarily and destructively, then the rules are kind of, understood and not violated too often. I know I interrupt a bit, but I don't try to derail.
Colin, look what I just put in the chat. You started to type in rules and then what comes after rules. Here's the one that I proposed some years ago, a 5-stage upgrade from the rule base at the bottom to ever more sophisticated.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm gonna undo this.
I think we hear Stacy in the back.
Yeah,
I think so.
I could hear Stacy.
I'm gonna unshare, stop sharing. There we go.
Yeah. But
sorry about that.
No, I think it's great what you're doing. I'm just trying to say, don't start from scratch. Start with a couple protocols, either ones we've tried before or ones that you like. And then as a group, organize those protocols in ways that fit the group in the GCC.
Yeah, and I think moving forward would be better characterized as, the starting of understanding.
Or try it out on a Saturday. Try out
and for
some
example,
of these protocols.
Well, just look at this and see what kind of models that could fall out of it. For example, if you wanted to play a game of Dictopedia or discernment, right? Then, what would you pick? Oh, I think, well, it's not as similar to how you would organize a debate, but not meant to, meant to be more productive. You know what I'm saying? Without talking too much.
Well, come on Clubhouse with me, because there's hundreds of these conversations happening all day long where they're testing out all these protocols.
Exactly. Formats, I call them. Yeah, formats.
Formats.
Now available on the desktop platform?
Yep.
Okay, because my cell phone, not my cell phone, but my smartphone, which is don't actually use as a cell phone, died.
Oh no.
Actually, I'm going to try to put a battery in it. This is a step up for me to rip open a smartphone and install a battery and reassemble it. I'll let you know if it works.
Well, guess what? Very interesting you mentioned that. I had an old phone that sat on the shelf for 2 years, and for some reason or other, I decided to have another look at it because the network went out on it. So I did another YouTube search, and I took it apart, took the 12 screws out, ripped the casing off of it, and managed to fold over a piece of thin cardboard, wedged it in there where they said to, and then put it all back together again. And the stinking thing works.
Fabulous, yeah. I have a few really old ones. This is an old HTC that can only run Android 2.3.5 Gingerbread. That's how old it is. Still works.
Oh, wow.
But I can't
I think
put
you're calling
any
somebody.
I can't put any modern software on it because Gingerbread will only support really, really old. In fact, I can't even go to the Google Play Store anymore. Google Play won't install as a installer on this old model. But
yeah, I've got a newer model that I bought, I think 3 years ago, and it's already obsolete. It's the Moto G. It's having troubles.
Yeah, you can still use them for limited functions, just not modern.
Well, I was happy because it has a nice screen on it. It has a bigger screen, almost a 6-inch screen on this old cell phone. So now I've got like a nice, a nice alternate video display for, remote viewing.
That's like a tablet almost.
It is.
Yeah.
It's kind of.
But yeah, so my iPad is old and this Droid is old, and there's only so many things you can do with it. Only go up to Android 7.0 or only go up to
I think-
iOS.
I think you can get a pretty new tablet from last year. They're selling, I saw them at Costco for $79. I bet that was last year. I bet they're on sale on eBay for like 50
Yeah.
bucks.
Also,
Right.
they
For
have them
Apple
on
tablet.
Amazon too. There's a name.
Android
name of the new-
tablet.
Android tablet.
Yeah, there's also one called the Kick or I can't remember that Amazon sells. That was sold out for Christmas, but it's very popular as well for kids and stuff.
Yeah, it's
I
turning
saw
the way of the calculator. They're going down to like 10 bucks
Yeah.
for a pretty, like, I think the Raspberry Pi just came out with a $5 Raspberry Pi.
There's a
Well, now that you have to
$50
have
one.
now that you have virtual reality, what good's a flat screen?
You can download an Android emulator for Windows, but if the application wants to use Bluetooth and your desktop doesn't have Bluetooth, then you can't use the application.
Yep. It's,
Well,
yeah, I went on Oculus last night and they took off my account and made me re-log in and change my password for Facebook. And they made me log in with Facebook. I tried to log in outside of Facebook and they were like, nope.
Yeah.
whoa.
And then I got in there and all my apps that I paid for on Oculus were gone.
Oh, geez.
So I went to the download store to download it, and it started downloading. YouTube was the first one I started with. And then magically all my apps just reappeared.
I think eventually, if you get the new generation of the installer to install, then you're back in business. But like just today, when I launched Zoom wanted a login, a fresh. My login is on Zoom. I haven't had to use it, and then I finally realized, oh, I've been using my Google ID.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you were
I have a
orchestrated.
password for it.
Well, all these companies are starting to get smart and they're starting to work together. They have a new protocol called Matter, which is a new consortium for Internet of Things.
Oh,
And they're using a protocol called Thread. So on top of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, they have another Thread protocol. But
Yeah.
what they're doing is just making sure that all these tech companies can talk to each other. And the one that's not in the loop is Facebook. They're trying to be on their own with this Oculus Meta thing. And Apple took them out. I'm really proud of Apple for taking out Facebook. I've been waiting for that for a while because they do such nefarious things in the background. And when they put that into the latest operating system of iOS, it took out all their advertising dollars.
Facebook's subscriber content is going down. The traffic on Facebook is dropping dramatically.
I saw
Well,
it
this
2
is new
years
to me.
ago.
This is new to me.
You didn't know
Thread
that?
Matter.
That's one of the
Yeah,
reasons
Thread-
that their stock plummeted 25 billion or 25% or some huge amount,
Yeah.
and that's
Heard
because
some rumblings.
people
Yeah.
are not using Facebook as much as they used to.
Yeah.
Well,
This
they're not
Thread
able
Matter
to
and Chip
capture.
is interesting too.
So every
ahead.
single link coming out of Facebook and out of WhatsApp and out of Instagram, they're tracking that data for their advertising network.
Right.
And all of those links coming out, they now put a little thing inside of the iOS that says they're tracking you, and you can turn that off. And that's what's killing Facebook right now.
Well, that's interesting.
Oh, look,
Yeah.
you guys are right here. Oh,
Yeah.
you guys can see what I'm doing right here.
They keep sending me sponsored
pretty-
input, and I keep saying this sponsored input is not of interest to me. And then I use that little thing saying, "Don't show me stuff from this sponsor anymore." But the thing is, every sponsor has like 12 different names for the same content. So there's 12 different outfits that are really feeding the same nonsense.
Yep.
So you have to catch all dozen of them.
And then I know a bunch of hackers that have figured out that the sensors inside of the Android phones are actually storing data and sending it back to Google.
Oh, really?
The voice sensor, microphone.
Even if I don't talk to my Android. I can, but I don't. I mean,
I'm just saying the things that are going on behind the scenes in the software industry are nefarious, and they're getting caught. Like Pegasus. Did you hear about the Pegasus
no.
hack? That was out of Israel. They hacked the iOS.
Oh. So they can listen. Now, I don't know about turning on your camera. Usually the camera lights up if you turn it on. I don't know about the mics. I don't know if the
Well,
mic.
it all has to do with APIs through different software.
Yeah.
So they're opening up gateways in the back end through the iOS, through the Android, through the different devices. And if you don't turn those things off, it's a problem. And Apple decided to show you what's being turned on and off now.
They also drain your battery a lot faster.
Yep.
Now it turns out my battery on the Android is an old Android, so the battery was dying anyway. But I ended up looking to see what the hell is draining my battery, and it showed me all the things that are running in the background. Now that wasn't why the battery was dying; it was just dying, period.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of stuff running.
I watched a really cool video, Barry. I'd love to share it with you. It was the future of software.
Yeah.
And it was talking about the APIs eventually with edge computing, creating like a new infrastructure of how everything all the protocols. And that's what I see going on right now is they're changing the protocols of communication with the identifying. Like I just called up Verizon to cancel one of my services.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you got to trade in a phone, blah, blah, blah. They asked for the IMEI number of the phone itself. So if they're tracking the IMEI number.
That's a serial number that's unique to the individual phone, right?
To the device.
Right.
So that was the big, I was in advertising in the early parts of, 2012 is when I got out of it. Google said I had to sell $40,000 of Google AdWords to keep my Google certificate to be a Google reseller.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, fuck this. I can't give this to my client. I just don't feel that this is the only way they can advertise, especially with social media popping off the way it was in 2012. Like they can do free advertising. But they made me do that because they had to reinstall the entire algorithm of Google around the individual devices themselves and get the protocol for each device to create this Internet of Things, which is where we're at right now. I think that's what Colin is looking up is the Matter protocol. But now that they have that protocol, they'll be able to do business with other countries. And all of these devices are going to be able to be programmed interoperably from Alexa to Siri to Bixby to Google. And the world that you see in the movies where you just talk to one device and it talks to all the other devices, that's now.
The mesh network, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, the sensors, they have sensors that can go into a glass of wine and tell you what makeup of wine, like what chemicals are inside of that wine. Like there's sensors that can tell you how big a bridge is. Like I mean, you're a scientist, you can capture sound data that'll tell you if an engine is running correctly.
Oh yeah, sure. A really good mechanic can listen to the engine and diagnose it.
And now the computer can do that too. So they put that sensor in the car and it can call up your mechanic and say, oh, time to bring it in.
Yeah. The last time my check engine light came on and I didn't know what it meant, I took it to Sears, which then was still in business, and they misdiagnosed it and charged me $750 to put in a part I didn't need. And I found out that the real problem was that my coolant level had fallen down to where it was at the same level as the sensor. And all I had to do was put more antifreeze in it. So this time when my check engine light came down, I said, oh, I better check my coolant level. Sure enough, it was down. And it took a month for the check engine light to go off, but eventually did go off.
Yeah. And what year is your car? Is it past 96?
97.
Okay. Yeah. So you can buy your own device and go online and you can get the same thing that the mechanic gets.
Yeah, I think AutoZone will do it for free, maybe once, maybe not every day, but once in a while. But this one, I guessed that was the same issue that I had before. So I just, bought a gallon of antifreeze and poured half of it in, half a gallon of it in. And I said, I know that this light is not going to go off immediately, but it did eventually go off.
I wish I could show you on the Oculus, there's a feature when you're going in to put on your glasses.
Yeah.
You draw a boundary around the area that you want to move around in.
Uh-huh.
And then the LiDAR, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 cameras on the front of it. It takes a scan of the room and it puts little dots
Right.
and lines of all the different things in your room.
Yeah.
So that data is going to tell you every piece of furniture you have, where it's placed in your house, everything that's in your house. And that's what Meta's banking on. That's why they're called Meta, is they're going to pull all that data of what's around you. You're in their virtual world, but they're scanning
It's
the real
insidious.
world around
That's
you.
insidious.
And they can
It
warn
is
you that
insidious.
you're about to bump into the wall.
That's why
they can show you a virtual obstacle where there really is an obstacle.
Yeah, they
which is
want to
why I
do Google
use that
Maps
feature,
for
but
everything.
think about
basically.
how much data with LiDAR, because they're using, I believe, LiDAR on these devices. So they're actually going to be able to see every single object in your house.
Yeah.
And they're not
Yeah.
going to be able to, they have it now. I bought it last year. So they've been scanning everything in my house in each room that I play the Oculus in.
Yeah, Google Maps for everything.
Yeah,
Street View for everything, basically. Street View for everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you look at what the Tesla company is doing, they haven't even launched their Dojo computer. That launches this summer. So they built a giant supercomputer with clusters of super fast petabyte GPUs that are all, they can just stretch and expand. And they're capturing with a fleet of 1.7 million cars driving around with 8 cameras in 2D, turning it into 3D and capturing every single thing, every movement, every dog, everything. So
Yeah, I
that's
saw
going
that
to
demo.
map the world in a way that's never been mapped. Like I lost my mind when I watched Autonomy Day this summer.
That's right. I saw that too. You alerted me and I watched that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and you saw what they were doing then. Now they've put out 60,000 beta testers in their fleet, and they're waiting to get to 100,000 beta testers. And once they do, they say if they get to 100,000 with the amount of data they've been capturing, and they're at version, I think 10.9 for the full self-driving, they'll be able
They're
to
at 9
capture
before,
so
I
many
think.
edge cases that it will be able to drive 10 to 20 times better than a human. And that's when the regulators won't have a leg to stand on. They'll have to say, if it's 20 times better than a human, you have to let that get out there.
For me, it only has to be 2 times better. My night vision is already so bad. I would love to be able to wear goggles that would give me what I would see if it was daylight when it's really at night.
And
Yeah,
how
I
much you want
cheated
to
last
bet?
night. I drove from LA with there's 2 cameras on the front of my car, and I drove back with them on, and I didn't touch it for an hour, and it kept the lane and stopped.
Yeah.
I got off the freeway and I